I think as you evolve as a technical writing organization within your company, as you grow and evolve, a really good wiki or style guide is kind of essential. Um, when you're first starting your small group, you're working really quickly. It's hard to come to get the group together as a consensus and have a really solid style guide. But I think it's really important because you're providing a really good customer experience by having consistency throughout the knowledge product.
Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast, where 𝐊𝐞𝐲 of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Marty Yu, a senior technical writer at CrowdStrike. Welcome, Marty, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's a pleasure, Marty. So I'm really looking forward to have a great session with you. So just help me understand a little bit more about yourself and how is your professional journey looking so far?
Well, I got into technical writing a little later in my adult life, but I worked in entertainment for, like 25, 30 years, and then made a transition over to technical documentation.
Great. So how long have you been in the technical documentation space, Marty?
Oh, wow. Well, now I'm giving away my age, I guess. Around almost 9 years, I think, I think that's how long.
Fantastic. So that's quite a lot of stories to share in this series then. So we do understand that along with standardizing documentation for internal teams, you do have a great deal of experience in creating customer-facing content. So what data insights do you need to improve the quality of customer-facing content, in your opinion?
That's a great question. It's really hard. I worked at a startup where you're moving so fast, and there are not a lot of resources you have. So you lean on your PMs, a lot, your product managers who have actually interfaced with customers. Where I'm at right now, we have a UX research team, which is such a great luxury, but also thinking about it, it's kind of essential to have. So we rely on those interviews. I've spent all of last week last Friday, watching customer interviews to try to get a sense of why a customer would need a particular feature. And that's obviously where you start. And then at a certain point, you also have to trust your own empathetic instincts to sort of put yourself in the customer's shoes. In terms of our initial approach, it's not super data-driven. Just you sort of accept that a lot of research has gone in, that this is a viable, product that people want. And then as you get metrics and get feedback, then you can adjust your documentation to make sure that it's exactly what customers need.
Absolutely. Just a question that came to my mind as well, Marty. When you started 9 years ago, as you can see now, there are a number of variations of documentation fields, right? Like UI, UX, and
Sure.
writers, and then you have a lot more other specializations now. But when you started, these kind of specializations didn't have existed. So how did you go about it?
Yeah, they did, and they did at where I started, and I started as a contractor at Google, and obviously that's a huge organization that was very regimented and had a lot of these mechanisms already in place. So they had a very strong UX writing team and a very strong technical writing sort of infrastructure there. So it was kind of a great place to learn, because anything I needed was already documented by somebody else, that about how to do something. in technical documentation. So, and then when I went to a startup right after that, I had a really solid foundation of sort of workflows and how things on a grand scale are done. So it made it sort of easier, but also a little daunting to be in a small startup where you're just doing everything and you're all of a sudden doing UX writing and there's not an editor like looking at your stuff constantly. So you have to have a lot of trust in what you're doing because you're moving so quickly.
Great, great. So I'm sure both the experiences would have taught you many lessons in different angles.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was a great way to sort of build my internal sort of set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
Still learning though, lots always learning.
Super. So again, as a technical writer, can you also please share your experience in creating in-app copy to enhance customer journey? And what are the major pointers you normally consider while doing so?
Yeah, well, UX in product writing is it's a very different skill set than technical writing of user-facing documentation, which is where I have most of my my experience. When I started, it was really just like, what have I seen in other products? And so a lot of the time I was just looking at the products I used or ones that were similar to the product I was working on. And that's kind of a good place to start. It's probably not the most, it's probably not what they say in the handbooks to use, but yeah, that's where I would start, and then sort of work with what's existing and then try to sort of make sense of it. But the actual writing itself is a different type of style of writing. And so that's something I just did a lot of sort of self-research on, how to write UX copy versus writing technical writing documentation.
Great. So since we are talking about the tools and the products that you already had gone through either in your day-to-day engagement or by just looking at the web, what do you think is an ideal knowledge base tool? What do you think, in your opinion, is an ideal knowledge base tool look like? Is there any particular feature you just can't take away from that ideal knowledge base solution?
Do you mean in terms of publishing or in terms of sort of organization? How do you?
At an organizational level as well, because you might be interacting with a number of tools as part of your journey.
Yeah, and in terms of publishing, there I know you said organization, but in terms of publishing, you kind of work with what you got, and a lot of those decisions aren't made by the technical writers, what tools you're given. So one thing that I think as you evolve as a technical writing organization within your company, as you grow and evolve, a really good wiki or style guide is kind of essential. Mm-hmm. When you're first starting your small group, you're working really quickly, it's hard to come to get the group together as a consensus and have a really solid style guide. But I think it's really important because you're providing a really good customer experience by having consistency throughout the knowledge product. So, and then it's a tough thing to build, but I think when you put the time into it, it saves time later. It saves decision fatigue for other writers trying to decide whether to do the Oxford comma or not. But at least you have a solid place to start from. Yeah, I would say that is a really important piece of the puzzle. One of the things we do at our CrowdStrike is we, the writers, are the ones who sort of build the style guide. It's like a community of practice. So we have smaller groups within the writing teams, ones that decide what words we use, another group that decides what our style guide is, and one about accessibility and so on. And it's a great way to build things, because as I was saying earlier, there's no right answer to a lot of these questions, like whether you use an Oxford comma or not, but somebody has to make that decision. And by having a small group of us do it, it eliminates having our manager have to make those decisions. It gives us a lot of sense of ownership, and it really also breeds a lot of just interconnectedness, because we all work remotely, but when we work together in these small little working groups, we feel a sense of sort of unity. And I think it's just a really great way to talk about technical writing within your work context. And it's been really, really fun. Yeah, so I highly recommend that if you're building a style guide, to do it with the idea of a community of practice.
Great. So I think that nicely moves into our rapid fire round. And my very first question is, who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
Well, like I said, it's a constant learning experience. But I have to give credit to my sister. So she's a technical documentation writer, and she got me my first job. So when I was onboarding, she explained how everything was. And then, like I said before, at Google, there's a lot of mechanisms in place to assure good, solid technical writing. And one was a great editor, 𝐊𝐞𝐲 𝐓𝐚𝐤𝐞𝐚𝐰𝐚𝐲, who's just super knowledgeable. And it was great to have somebody who was really looking out to elevate the team, and was so generous with her time. So yeah, she was great.
So thank you. Thank you once again to your sister who introduced you to this amazing field. Again, I can sense that you read quite a lot as well. And by the way, you have interacted with me in the last 15 minutes. There's a lot of resources you might be referring to. So can you share a couple of those resources, particularly related to documentation?
Well, one thing when you're building a style guide, like I was saying, like looking at doing research at what is already out there is really helpful. So when we were building our technical writing style guide, we used the Microsoft style guide as a resource, as sort of a starting point. And that became sort of our dictionary. So if we didn't have something in our style guide, we said, okay, check the Microsoft style guide. It's online. A lot of companies use it as a reference, but then you can change it, add your own rules to make it as tailor it to your customer needs. But it's a great resource. I learned so much from that, as well as there's a book called Modern Technical Writing. It's a very thin volume written by Andrew Eder. I think he's at Amazon or was, and it really is a very concise, short volume for someone getting started as a technical writer. It outlines some great tools to use and just sort of how to build your own voice in a very simple way that is not too prescriptive, but also just makes a lot of sense.
Super. My very last question to you is, what is that one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Yes. Don't get into the entertainment business. No, because that's where I worked before as technical writing. No, that was also really fun. But I think just talk less, listen more, maybe. One of the best things is just to absorb everything around you, from your engineers to your marketing people to your product managers, and then sort of sit with that and then distill it out. I think my younger self was much more eager to jump to conclusions and answer these questions, thinking that I knew it, but it's always better to listen.
Very nicely put forward, Marty. Thank you so much. Now, before we say bye to our audience, is there anything I missed to ask you, or is there anything you would like to share for the guests today?
I just think it's a really rich world of uh, the technical writing world is just a bunch of nerds who are really interested in things. And I found just by engaging with other writers, it makes me a better writer. So there are great communities out there worth exploring to learn more. So I encourage everyone to reach out to your coworkers or to people in the community.
Super. So as always, there's a lot of information to take away from this podcast series. And once again, thank you for participating and sharing your amazing experience with us, Marty. So have a great day and all the very best for your future projects.
It's so much fun.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.